Thank you so much for joining us. Today we're going to walk through the different operating models and ways to implement an MDM initiative and how to help you avoid some of the common pitfalls with implementing a program from the technology side, as well as how to integrate it properly into the kind of people and processes that are necessary to support a good MDM initiative. Namely, I'm going to talk you through, what traditional approaches led to and how the analogies of these traditional approaches can be seen in other categories like implementing data warehouses, implementing data lakes as well. So let's dive in and take a look. So first of all, let's just start with a high level grounding of what we're all trying to achieve. Us at CluedIn, our customers, our partners, even customers not of CluedIn. Companies generally have this belief that data is and will continue to play a pretty pivotal role in a lot of different internal use cases. Things like automation of slow processes, things like increasing the overall efficiency of the business, things like being able to discover signals and insights that sit within their data that maybe they've missed. Maybe there's a particular customer that is absolutely prime, an ICP, for the products that you are selling to the market, and you've missed them just because you've been busy in other areas. There's hopefully some hidden signals in the data that we can start to get out. And I think there's a general belief also in the market that at some level, the higher the quality of the data, the more kind of easy it is to use, to find, to discover, to pick up and trust. These are all elements that kind of lead into this general idea of providing a better outcome, a more successful outcome in the end, or a higher chance of success in these initiatives. And so at CluedIn, we really focus on this particular part of projects, is making sure that your data is pristine, making sure that it's ready for insights and ready for projects, and doesn't act as a hurdle when you've got some amazing idea or initiative that you want to implement where data is the fuel for it. So at CluedIn, we focused on a couple of key elements of this. Number one, obviously moving from something that is done manually into automation. This is actually the kind of bread and butter of CluedIn. In fact, we're used in a lot of different use cases around increasing the efficiencies of supply chain. We all have supply chain as businesses. It is essentially the logic that drives initial interest in the products that you or services that you provide, all the way through to implementation, all the way through to customer success. This is the supply chain of every business. And anything in that supply chain that is manual, that can be automated, especially when it comes to data, is something we focus on here at CluedIn. The other big thing that we focus on is this gap between the IT and business. Let me put this in another way, maybe giving an example. We've all met these people at our companies or customers that we work with, And I like to call them subject matter experts. They're these people that they just know everything about a particular part of the business. And it could be they know everything about a particular technology. It could be everything about a particular part that makes up one of your products. It could be everything about how SharePoint is administrated. You'll also find these subject matter experts that know everything about a particular business domain in data. Whether it's the third-party vendors that provide you the solutions to run your business, whether it's your customers, whether it's the products, whether it's the materials that make up that product, you'll find these people within the business that are just uncannily can just tell you anything about this data. They can fill in missing values. They can tell you what's right versus wrong. They can tell you if there's duplicate entities or not. And more often than not, these people are not involved in the supply chain of data. So part of what we do here at CluedIn is making sure we bring those different groups together. At the end of the day, I think we all do subscribe to this idea that data is and will continue to play a pivotal role in our businesses, and therefore our job at CluedIn is to provide pristine data where it's needed, at the speed that you need it, and at the level of trust that you needed as well. Let's all kind of take a step back and take a look at what we've been doing so far in data as businesses. I mean, it's an understatement that we've all been investing quite a lot in data. In technology stacks, we've built, we've purchased the best hyperscalers on the market. Probably we are subscribed to multiple of them, whether that's Azure or Google Cloud or AWS or so forth. We've implemented and invested in AI technology, BI technology, machine learning technology. We've got lakes, we've got lake houses, we've got lake bases, we've got data warehouse. We've hired great teams and great talent, but yet there is still this overarching feeling that data is probably not providing the proper value that it should be. And when I actually do start to utilize data within a business, that it's just not really in a shape or form that's easy to pick up and start delivering value with. There's a general lack of trust as enterprises pick up this data, and statistics from the analysts go as high as 88% in the number of enterprises that actually don't trust the data that they're working with that's being fueled for their use cases. So something does feel like it's missing. And for me, I think MDM and data quality is not necessarily those missing pieces, but it's the capabilities that they provide behind it that seem to be a missing piece of the puzzle. A lot of it we've already alluded to in the previous slide when we talked about this kind of lack of synergy that exists between people in the business and people in IT and engineering. Coming from a software engineering background myself, I know that I'm personally guilty of this in thinking, it seems like a complex thing to do. It requires data modeling. It requires integration pipelines. Let's do this in IT and engineering. We'll pull it here and then we'll deliver a solution. And this is really where things just don't go well. So let's dive in and take a look at what the actual solution could be. Speaking of analysts, there's enough data today to back up this kind of, this situation that I'm alluding to, this hole, this void in the market, where some analysts are saying around 75% of these MDM or data quality initiatives fail. It's for many different reasons. The number one reason is the inability to tie it to some internal business value. And the truth is, this is the same across a lot of projects. Data warehousing, data integration, CMS, CXP, lots of different initiatives. This is one of the main failure rates. But you can see others are kind of sharing this idea as well across the analysts, that it's a lot about the complexity, the inability for IT and business to come together. And there is some general friction that naturally comes when you're having this initiative that spans outside these major lines of business, and where we need to actually solve some group work there to get a solution in the end. So let's first of all go a little bit back through history and talk a little bit about how MDM came to be. And I think this will help you understand how it's evolved and also where it needs to go as well. MDM is roughly a 35-year-old category, at least from a technology perspective, but a lot of the actual principles were formed much earlier than 35 years ago. And really the general idea was that it would be a great incentive, a great idea. We would get great success if we were to bring IT and business together, to work on data focused on things like accuracy and completeness, and that we would just spend extra meticulous time on certain business domains, certain data that is really pivotal to our business. The general idea being, if we had an issue with maybe a couple of transactions in our data, or if we had an issue with some of our analytics, it's not the worst thing in the world, right? However, if we start sending invoices to the wrong customers, that's something that actually could really hurt the business, the brand, the cash flow of the business. And so there were certain business domains that are identified as we need to spend a little bit more time and care, and more people need to be involved in this business domain. This is really where the concept started to develop. You can also follow the trajectory of the technologies in this space were very much aligned with how databases were built and how they evolved in the market as well. And for anyone who has implemented something like a data warehouse with a traditional kind of approach, and when I mean that, I mean a relational database, building a data model, building a schema, trying to essentially squeeze all of your existing data into this predefined model. This was the technology at the day, so it's of no surprise that the majority of MDM systems are built on this paradigm of build a data model up front, work with the business to understand what they want and what the data should look like, what kind of outcomes they're wanting from it, and then try to squeeze all of your data into this predefined model. Now, you can see in parallel categories, things like data warehousing, data lakes, these are exactly the reasons why the lakehouse even started to evolve. Number one, it was this idea of, well, there's new architectures available because the cloud is giving us almost endless compute, endless scalability in being able to scale up and, most importantly, scale down as well. So there's some cost benefits that came from that. That offered some new architectures, which is what really spawned the evolution, if not revolution, of the data warehouse, data lake house approach that we're all privy to right now. MDM obviously went through a similar type of evolution where the majority of reasons why traditional MDM approaches were tricky to implement was because this same paradigm. It gave this premise that, listen, we need to bring all of our data together. We need to standardize it. We need to apply master data management capabilities to it in order to help drive downstream initiatives, usually starting with analytical initiatives, business intelligence, reporting, and things like this. However, the reality really went in a different direction. The idea was simple. If we can all conform into one universal model, things should be easier downstream. It should be easier to build reports. It should be easier to come up with new use cases. It should be easier to fulfill requests from the business when they want something new, whether it's new data sets, because everything is in this conformed model and we can get really used to it, and it will scale nicely because we've done a lot of upfront thinking about it. And actually quite the opposite happened. ITQs grew because we couldn't forecast exactly how people would want to query the data. And the queries that came 6 months later don't necessarily fit into the predefined model that we hyper-tuned in order to be able to service those initial requests at scale. And this is really a sign of the pre-cloud era. And we did this for a very good reason. We didn't want to overcapitalize on buying a lot of equipment in the idea that maybe people wouldn't use it or that we don't need that much scale. And there wasn't this elasticity that the cloud brought. So that was definitely one of the pieces that forced us down this kind of traditional route. And unfortunately, MDM traditionally has suffered from this type of approach. So the first concept that made traditional MDM hard to kind of produce good value was that we had to squeeze all of our data into a predefined model. And in our exposure over the last 10, 11 years of being in the market, this is a moot exercise. You spend more time trying to squeeze it into a predefined model, often with failure, than any value that you're focusing on. And from what we've seen from the Lakehouse approach, and very much what we do from the CluedIn side, is very much a zero upfront modeling and a model per use case approach. And a lot of this is because CluedIn has been built on that cloud infrastructure and born during the cloud era as well. The other complex thing that we often see with traditional approaches to MDM is that they are buried and remain in IT. And this goes against the entire premise and idea of master data management in the first place. So let's break down some of the complexities and maybe even kind of bring up some of the myths involved in this part as well. Number one, of course, a very technical MDM system that requires you to do data modeling and schemas and indexes and pick the right data types. things like schema drifting. Of course, that's always going to be a system that's going to have a high IT dependency. But we have to kind of remember that there's already very good IT and engineering tools that allow you to do that. And so you've got to really ask the question, okay, what is MDM supposed to add to the story? And we often saw the cases with other companies implementing a traditional approach to MDM and then coming to CluedIn as customers, is that this idea of handing it over to the business to then take over the responsibility was often met with this brick wall, because we were handing over something that you weren't involved in, that requires some technical skills to wield. And this is often where these kind of projects start to fail. So the IT dependency, this is something, a red flag that you should look out for when implementing MDM. If you are implementing MDM completely in IT, this is a red flag. Really, MDM is about being able to bring in a non-technical audience, the subject matter experts that are fantastic at knowing what happens in the business, but they're not technical. They don't code. They can't write SQL statements, but they know a lot about the business. They need a canvas to be able to instill their knowledge of the business into data without data modeling, without indexing, without data types, and all of these complex IT concepts. The other big limitation that, and somewhat a myth for MDM, is there's only certain business domains that fit within this scope. The reality is, the last 11 years of working at CluedIn have taught us, and working with our customers, is that different domains are important for different industries. And so there are obviously the common ones, like everyone has customers, everyone has products, everyone has services, everyone has employees, and so forth. Yes, fair. They are common. They will be used across a lot of different use cases. But actually, it turns out that for some businesses, POS data is the most important thing, transactional data. And if you're the kind of business that has come up through mergers and acquisitions, you'll know that each POS system is different. There's no universal IDs that are often in these systems. Even though there are standards for international universal IDs for products, it's often not the case in these POS systems that they are supporting. So you actually need the critical capabilities of fuzzy merging, entity reconciliation, data cleaning, and things like this on a very non-traditional MDM style business domain like transactions. And all of this kind of approach led to this very slow time to market, which today is just really the death of any project. If we can't prove value very quickly and make it obvious that it was because of this initiative, initiatives fail. And why was this the case? Well, often it was because it started with this idea that was not scalable. Let's try build a data model that will fit all of our data in this current use case, and hopefully future use cases as well. I can stand here and say that's an impossible task to be able to do unless you have a very flexible modeling engine to be able to do it. The second part of this is often we were stuck in this modeling phase because it's complex, because there's a lot of different people that we need to involve, different stakeholders. And the reason why is once we've got that model in place, often traditional MDM technologies make it very hard to actually change. Adding extra columns, easy. Remodeling, extremely hard. The number of times our customers have wanted to remodel the data for different use cases, this is a daily occurrence. And so you can see why this kind of traditional approach, it was not a surprise that you were 12 months in and you didn't even have data in the platform. You were fighting with ETL pipelines to try and fit a square peg into a round hole. So let me give you some practical examples of the difference between a traditional approach to MDM and what we're calling agentic MDM, something that is much more scaled with the intelligence and cost efficiencies of AI. Let's start with the overall main process. If I was to give a very simplistic view of what we're doing here in MDM, we're taking often data in from multiple different places, a style called consolidation, and we're wanting to fit it in essentially to a golden record. This doesn't mean we're wanting to fit it all into the same look and feel. In fact, we often want to project it differently for different use cases. So in a traditional approach, this is your classic build a data model up front, set a schema in stone, hope that your data fits into the schema. If it doesn't, it becomes an IT problem. The business can't really help because we've got to do transformations, we've got to do different formatting, we've got to try and build different ETL pipelines, maybe it's joins, maybe it's SQL statements, maybe it's notebooks, in order to munge this data into what we want is the same schema. An agentic framework, an agentic approach to this is much more fluid. It's much more agile. It's much more forgiving at this stage. It says not everything needs to look the same because everything won't look the same in the end. And actually that's typically what most people are not asking for. What they're asking for is, can I please have high quality data that's easy to consume, that's easy to understand, that's flexible and agile to the use cases that may come in the future. From a human perspective, a traditional approach is very controlled. It's very much sitting down, looking at your data and thinking, what do I want to do with this data? An agentic approach to this is much more about sitting back and having AI go through and recommend and suggest the majority of the things you're probably going to want to do anyway. If you were an expert in this space, you would want to say, let's build some validation. Let's tag records that don't fit into the valid format that we expect. Let's build matching rules to find duplicates. It's very kind of upfront control. You are basically prescribing and coming with the ingredients of what you're wanting to do. An agentic approach doesn't remove that, but what it does is it just accelerates it. It says, listen, you're dealing with this type of business domain. We know what a good email should look like. We know what a good phone number should look like. We know the standards for RFC, for IEEE. This is what I recommend will impose good quality data and standards in the end, obviously backed by a human in the loop in the end. For something like matching or deduplication or entity reconciliation, predefined rules is pretty much the classic approach to this problem, and it will get you far. It will get you a good 40, 50, 60% solution for everything that fits into this nice set of logic and rules. This is fine. This is the approach, but it will get you only a certain way. An agentic approach is much more loop focused. It's the matching loop that scales. It's saying that yes, matching rules, deterministic, will get you a big chunk of possible matches, and they're the kind of low-hanging fruit. Great. But there's also the loop built into it for saying, listen, if I want those deterministic rules to be automated, I might need to clean the data because we've got all these records that might require fuzziness, but that leads often to overfitting or underfitting in some cases as well. This is the death of matching. This is where you get into this spiral of everything now takes a day to investigate. This is not the loop you want to get into. From a governance perspective, once again, up front, what policies do you want? What workflow gates do you want? Now, an agentic approach, once again, it doesn't remove this, but it accelerates it. It says, hey, listen, I know what good governance is like. I know you want audit trails. You may not know this, but you also need lineage. You need rollback support. You need workflow processes. This is what a good workflow process would look like for that type of data. Because you're in this industry, it probably needs to do these extra things because these models have this built in. Now, of course, these models can be guided by end users and customers. Great. But actually kind of the bare bones guardrails and harnesses are built into these agentic workflows. And it doesn't have to be something you have to remember. It's not an afterthought. It's something that's baked in. From a context perspective, traditional MDM was all about data dictionaries. Have you filled in all the descriptions? Do you have reference data? Do you have metadata associated with it? This is still important, but an agentic nature brings in different elements to this. This is now something that can work at a higher level. Entity graphs, ontologies, knowledge graphs, call it what you will. But also there's extra things that allow an end user to start to trust data. These are things like where the provenance, the lineage, the data quality scores that tell me that the data that we have is also agreed to in official sources, things like legal entities, things like products, etc. The outcome is somewhat similar. We're trying to achieve that trusted source of data. And this doesn't mean that we have a single view of it. It means that we have this trusted source that can be flexibly projected in different ways for different use cases. I am of the firm belief that data is not just correct. It can be correct for different use cases depending on the audience as well. So what is the solution? Really, at the end of the day, the solution is to bring IT and business together. MDM and data quality is somewhat seen as the conduit of how to do that. And really, it's about bringing those end users, the subject matter experts, into the data supply chain, not to ask them to do data modeling, not to ask them to build code, but to give them a canvas to instill their knowledge of something they're an expert on into the supply chain of data. So they're not seen as an afterthought, or in many cases, not even included in the overall delivery pipeline of data from source through to insight. So what should you be looking for? What are the green flags that you should be looking for when you're looking at a more modern approach, something that is more applicable to the modern agility and flexibility that's needed in data platforms today? At CluedIn, we focus on a couple of key things. Number one, automation. If you can automate it, fantastic. Now, if you can automate it using your data platform, your code, also fantastic. Just make sure it's maintainable. You're wanting automation that doesn't require us to go back to IT when we've got new ideas and wait on a queue for them to implement more automation. So look for a solution that allows you to almost scalably automate challenges, knowing that they might not be static. You might need to come back and change those automations at a later point. Agility. Don't put me into a box. Don't make all my data look the same, because A, it never will, and B, it actually turns out that's not what gives speed. Having everything in the same format definitely has some pros, but the data warehousing eras that we've gone through have proven time after time trying to achieve a somewhat universal model didn't yield the benefits that we wanted. So, flexibility, definitely part of that as well. The other thing is quick time to value. So CluedIn is a SaaS application. You can sign up at CluedIn.com. You will have an account in about 30 seconds, and you can already start to solve use cases on smaller business domains. Always start small and grow from there. But you need a platform that allows you to grow. This is one of the complexities with upfront data modeling, is that we're pushed into starting small, which means we often then design with small things in mind. If we need to then grow, often we have to go back to the drawing board and completely remodel based off what we are growing to. You need a platform that can grow with that modeling without adding the complexity. So at CluedIn, we focus on bringing the business into the supply chain of data and providing them tools, a canvas, to be able to instill their knowledge as the subject matter expert without getting in the way of IT and engineering. There's this nice harmony that exists, this nice handoff, especially with modern medallion infrastructures, where there are clear lines in the sand of where we hand the data off and when we get it back. Really what we're adding in that box, in that extra step, is someone in the business has validated this is great. Someone in the business has also gone in and fixed the things we would never fix in IT and engineering, with full lineage, full traceability of what they've been able to do as well. So let's dive in and take a look at some of these important factors. Number one is this concept of zero upfront modeling. I've alluded to it already a few times in this session, but it's generally the idea of, let's not try to put our world in a predefined structure. Let's make things a little bit more fluid. And because of the scale of the cloud, we don't really need to do this anymore. That was one of the reasons why upfront modeling made sense many years ago. we didn't have the elasticity of the cloud, and we had to make these upfront decisions on where indexes would be placed, what types of queries people would do on the data. It was very fair. It's not the case anymore. The other part is that a majority of us don't have 15, 20 people on standby to be able to help us with fixing this technical data debt. So scaling out with AI agents that can do a majority of the planning, a majority of the analysis, and then involve human in the loop, subject matter experts to tweak the plan, add to the plan, remove parts from the plan, reject the plan, approve the plan, iterate on the plan. This agentic mechanism is allowing to do this, scaled obviously by the large language models as well in a private, secure, and sovereign manner. And listen, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Analysts are saying CluedIn is leading in the space of MDM with large language models and AI. And a lot of this is because of our early exposure into AI. CluedIn was the first to market with its AI large language model capabilities, and then have since then been typically the first to market by many, many months in producing its chat experience or Copilot experience or ChatGPT experience, in producing its agentic experience, which right now is, it is close to 2 years since we've had our agentic framework out on the market. This has really helped us build out with our customers production use cases on production at production scale. In fact, over 70% of our customers today are running these AI agents in production. Now, human in the loop is super important. This is delivered, this federation, via our workflow engine. We integrate into lots and lots of different systems, whether it's ServiceNow, Jira, Teams, Outlook, Slack, etc., to be able to federate the responsibility of decisions out into the lines of business without asking them to learn a big MDM system. At the end of the day, we need individuals to make small decisions with all the context provided. Are these the same records? They do not need to come to an MDM system to be able to answer that, but we need to deliver everything they need to know into the channels they work with, Slack or Teams potentially, and say, listen, here is a challenge you're responsible for. I've given you everything, including explanations, lineage, provenance, the values, recommendations on what we think it is. I just need you to rubber stamp it because this is going to happen and then be delivered out to the business. So that responsibility layer is incredibly important. Obviously built on a backbone of Microsoft Azure, which means we bring that scale, that inherited security and compliance model as well. How does this add value in the end? I'm not going to go through all of these elements. I'm just going to pull out a couple of special ones. It's not hard to imagine that if traditional MDM, majority of the time was spent on this upfront data modeling, it's not hard to then realize that if CluedIn doesn't require that upfront data modeling, that there is an inherent increase in the efficiency of getting time to value. We're not trying to squeeze everything into a predefined structure. We're being more fluid, being more agile, meaning that we can get data out quicker, meaning that we can actually iterate faster in that value as well. Obviously, with the introduction of AI, this has helped not only solve challenges that were somewhat insurmountable before, if not impossible, but it has increased the amount of automation, so lowering the amount of manual work involved. And more, and I'll be an example of that, more and more I'm finding that manual tasks are something I am getting allergic to. Whereas, before, put the elbow grease, roll up the sleeves, get in and get the manual work. Because we know what is capable with these AI models, the idea of automation and scale with AI is just becoming more expected in the market today as well. We have that inherited cost efficiency of running in the cloud and having the SaaS model as well, with all the sovereignty requirements, all the ISO 27K SOC Type 2 compliance from our side as well. This is how you achieve pristine data. The traditional approaches had its pros, it had its cons. The modern approach has its pros and its cons. The modern approach to MDM leans much more towards agility, flexibility, and adapting to change, scaled through AI. The traditional approach, very similar to building a traditional data warehouse in a relational database. It was about IT-driven, upfront data modeling, ETL pipelines, trying to fit everything into a controlled manner. And I think the market has proven enough. This is not the way to do it. And this is also not an attractive approach to implementing and solving a challenge. We want speed, we want quick time to value, and this is what the modern approach to MDM helps with. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll join you on the next webinar.